Okay, thank you everyone for joining today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Matt McLarty. I'm the Vice President of Client Solutions for Layer 7 Technologies. And today we're going to talk about what I think is a very interesting and timely topic, how to use API management solutions for your enterprise mobile access. This session is being recorded, and we'll be posting the recording and the slides and through various channels. So let's just jump right in now to the presentation. What I'm going to go through is an overview of the landscape today in the enterprise, the BYOD movement, as we're calling it, bring your own device, as well as the explosion of apps that are being created, not just for consumer use, but for enterprise use as well. This is being driven heavily through consumerization of IT. We'll touch on that topic as well. And then from that, really look at how that changes the landscape of enterprise infrastructure and enterprise IT. What does the future of enterprise mobility look like, and what is the new paradigm of development and infrastructure that results from that? As well as, that's the future, but how do we bridge from the present? How can we leverage our current services and assets that are available? And the final section, we'll dive into the API management solution set that really is an enabler, a bridge from what we have today in the enterprise around shared services and APIs, and how do we use that as the building block for really migrating to enterprise mobility. We'll go through some solution ideas as well as some real-life case studies about how we've already applied this using our technologies. So again, if you have questions as we go through this, please put them in the chat box, but I'm going to start right into it. So I mentioned BYOD, bring your own device, and this is really becoming a popular buzz term, but it's also a reality. Employees are already bringing their mobile devices to work, en masse. They're whatever device they're using for mobility, smartphone, iPad, it's become so popular for them. It's become so personalized for individuals that it just makes sense. They want to be able to do their work tasks as well as their consumer tasks. So, as they bring their devices into the enterprise, our IT departments are somewhat reluctant to allow this to happen and have legitimate concerns. As you can see in the breakdown here in the infographic that's attached, security is the #1 concern of IT departments who are bringing in employee-owned devices, personal devices. Also just the cost implications and knowledge. If you have so many different device types, there can be a real explosion of complexity. But the fact is that no matter the reluctance, legitimate or otherwise, it's happening. And I have to say that as we move on to the next slide here, this was a study that was done on iPad usage at work around the globe. And keep in mind, smartphones have obviously been around longer than the iPad, but in just 2 years, there's been an explosion of adoption of iPad usage in the enterprise. So if you consider that that's probably the newest technology that would be being driven by consumers bringing their own devices into the workplace, the numbers are staggering. So of the iPad ownership population out there in the world, we're seeing big-time adoption rates across every continent, as you can see in the bottom here. 67% of iPad owners are using them at work in North America, and the numbers are even higher in South America and in Africa, which I think is very interesting. So consumerization of IT really means that in the past, historically we would have this trend where there would be government research, public-funded research done, and that would be brought into the business world, and then out of the business world, the technology that was created would then be given to consumers, right? I mean, personal computing is an example of that. But really that trend's been reversed now, where we see things like smartphones and iPads being adopted widely by consumers, and then that's being driven into the organization, and in some respects our public institutions can be the last adopters. So that trend is real. You're seeing it here. The details on the left of the screen show that for those users of the iPads who are bringing them to work, there's a real effect of replacement of functionality. The highest stat is on laptops, so any users out there who are doing work functions on laptops, they're migrating 54% of those users have partly replaced their laptop work using their iPads. So there are big-time concerns around security, what the effect is going to be, but this is kind of an unstoppable movement right now of individuals, employees bringing their iPads to work, bringing their smartphones to work, and it really brings a challenge to the IT leadership to address the security concerns, address the cost concerns, so on. But not only is there a set of challenges. I mean, this isn't just about consumers wanting to be happy, being able to play Angry Birds at work, right? I mean, there is a real positive effect that can happen here. And although the hardware devices coming into the institution are the catalyst for this whole movement, the payoff really comes with the capability that can be provided through mobile apps. So, you know, we went through the last 10 years of user interface trending towards thinner clients and browser-based applications for portability and consistency of experience and so on. But with the mobile devices now, you know, there's a whole other set of capabilities because they're portable, because they come with integrated functions like cameras and GPS and, you know, compasses, whatever, gyroscopes, any sort of interesting functionality that comes with it. Those can be harnessed and used in new ways in providing user experience, collecting information. And so there is a real benefit to bringing those devices into the enterprise. As you can see here, the survey numbers tell us productivity increases, number one, you know, reducing paperwork, increasing revenue, reducing cost. These are all big drivers for organizations to adopt usage of these smart devices. You can imagine in a paper-based world, this has been an ongoing challenge of how do we replace paper-based processes with digitized media, and that has been a challenge in the desktop world, somewhat alleviated by the portability of laptops, but you go to a whole other level when you're dealing with smartphones and iPads and tablets that can be brought onto the floor of a manufacturing institution, for example, in the medical industry. And there's just all kinds of use. The other thing that's happening is, whereas there was that reluctance even in the consumer world with some of the same concerns that we've seen for the enterprise, such as security, you know, new protocols, new security mechanisms are making it easier and more palatable for consumers out there to go and use their apps for doing sensitive things like banking, you know, doing money movement, e-payments and so on, using their mobile devices. So, you know, apps are really the payoff here, and there's a huge benefit, but the question is, you know, how can we deliver these apps securely? How can we deliver them quickly? And as we've known from all of the enterprise IT work that we've done, you know, since the dawn of enterprise IT, with every new wave of technology comes an initial maybe knee-jerk reaction to say, hey, let's go and rebuild everything using the new stuff. But we know that's not how it works, right? We know that the best way to go forward is to be able to leverage the best parts of what we've already built and then harness the best, most innovative and useful pieces of the new technologies. So we move on to the next slide. This is actually a model for the pillars of an enterprise mobility strategy. And this is straight from a book written by Nathan Clevenger called iPad in the Enterprise. This is a phenomenal book. I recommend it to anyone. And it really, the scope of it, although it does have some very good and very specific material around the iPad, really addresses this whole space of enterprise mobility and how do you leverage the benefits of the mobile space for enterprise. How do you address exactly what we're talking about today? So I highly recommend this book. and it really does take a big picture view, and really talks to a number of different stakeholder audiences. So highly recommend it. The piece I want to focus on here is this middle piece of the pillar, Enterprise Services Platform. So as I said in the last slide, really we want to get apps out there. We want our workforce in the organization to be able to leverage all the strengths of mobility in their enterprise IT. But how do we enable that? You know, a lot of these apps, we can have fun bells and whistles on the device itself, but a lot of them are still going to be data-driven and still going to be leveraging the key data assets that you have in the enterprise. And the cornerstone of that is what is called the Enterprise Services Platform in this model. And this is really akin to those data services, those web services, those APIs that expose the core business function of the organization, of the business. So really, you know, behind that platform, there's a lot going on. You've got all the data in the organization, all the infrastructure, all the business logic that's tied to those assets. But fundamentally, the interface point for the mobile space are these APIs that are serving to provide a very thin and useful, as needed data interface for mobile apps to connect to, and then leverage that functionality. And we've really seen an evolution happen around that we'll get into. But first of all, there is a real benefit to tying mobile apps into that enterprise services layer, into that API layer, you know, from all these different dimensions. So when you have the enterprise services available through APIs, it really gives you the chance to increase your revenue. I mean, what we're seeing happening in organizations is historically you've had this application integration that happens that is usually internally done, and when you're offering up these services, you know, the whole SOA movement was around reducing cost by providing services to reuse. Well, now we're opening up a whole other avenue for revenue, because when you have these mobile app platforms and mobile app development, you can now offer those same services that were part of a cost center as revenue-generating business services. When you have an API that could be reused across the mobile app development platform, now, you know, they're going to be having revenue-generating apps, which in turn, using your service, you can now charge for that, or even just create exposure for your services that will build a higher profile and increase brand awareness and build revenue that way. So there's a whole ecosystem of APIs that are out there, and for organizations that are exposing their APIs, they can either do it to third-party app developers and drive revenue that way, or even have new routes to market and drive market that way through their own internal mobile channels. The cost reduction value proposition is still there and is compounded and enhanced by the fact that we have new mobile avenues for reuse. So as we offer up our business services for an organization through APIs and shared services, you know, you're going to get more benefit because you can quickly spin up a mobile app to leverage the interfaces that are already there, and you can leverage the infrastructure that's already there. Compliance is always a consideration here, and it's more of a survival mechanism than a benefit. But being able to leverage the services platform, being able to leverage existing security policies and technologies is a big savings, because you can, you know, point to existing compliance and regulatory initiatives and say, all right, you know, we satisfy that already, as opposed to having to go through the entire compliance process, soup to nuts, if you're spinning up an entire new infrastructure. And finally, quality of service is a consideration, is a big consideration, because I think what we're seeing in the early wave of mobile is we're seeing, you know, kind of dipping our toe in the water type mobile services, marketing-driven exercises around how do we get an app in the App Store for our company that will raise awareness in the community. But, you know, as we go through the evolution further, the types of services that we'll be offering up to the mobile community, more and more are going to be mission-critical type applications, transactional systems, things that are going to require a much more sophisticated level of integration. And when you build your mobile apps on top of this enterprise service foundation and API foundation on proven systems, you know that you're building on quality systems that already have the SLAs in place that can meet the performance metrics, as I said, can meet the security needs, and really support what will be a big explosion in traffic resulting from the mobile world. So, you know, as I said, the mobile space is driving a new paradigm of integration, and actually it goes right back to the infrastructure level. So when we look at what the enterprise, you know, it's not without challenges, right? We've got mobile apps that are coming in, and we want to get to those benefits, but there are going to be a number of challenges that result from this. First of all, as I just said, the number of mobile devices that are out there, there's just a huge increase in message volumes. One client I worked with recently, they just really saw, you know, I'm touching on my Canadianism here. They found a hockey stick in their volumes, meaning once they enabled their services for mobile, they found an elbow where their volumes increased much more steeply than prior to onboarding mobile devices, and they did an order of magnitude increase in the volume that they had to support. Inside the network, another capability that's enabled by mobile devices, you're going to want to be able to coordinate services from multiple sources. Like I said before, if you think about some of the APIs you'd want to use in a mobile device, could be location-based services. You may want to go to a kind of a broad internet provider for location services, but yet then use that information in conjunction with doing some services and APIs that are more localized to your own company. So there's an element of orchestration that is a challenge. The other thing that's happened, you know, as we've seen services platforms grow up in big enterprise, a lot of times you can see web services-based, SOAP-based interfaces, and really for the mobile world, there's a real need to be lightweight, to be thin, and to provide only information that's needed in order to minimize the data footprint going back and forth from the mobile devices to the enterprise. So that's a challenge as well. You want to be able to reuse interfaces that exist today, but they may not exist in the format that's best suited for mobile. In the data world, really privacy end-to-end, integrity end-to-end, they have to be preserved. The bring your own device approach itself, because it mixes personal and business use, that really changes the security model as well. I think in the desktop world, we were used to just locking down the device, having a managed device, but that is not going to be acceptable here in a world where, you know, users have a lot of personal data there. They're not going to accept having their device wiped out because they've got a new release, a new version of some managed software. You know, like I said before, they're not going to want to have their Angry Birds games wiped out because you're doing a new OS upgrade, something along those lines. So it really changes where the security perimeter goes in the paradigm of integration. Again, APIs themselves have to be reusable across multiple platforms and non-mobile platforms. So even though you're servicing the mobile community, you still need to be able to provide those APIs out to the existing consumers. And finally, there's another revolution going on in the infrastructure behind the scenes, behind the APIs around data. So, you know, big data, all the business intelligence that can be derived from big data, there's going to be a real challenge to be able to service that in real time and have that accessed by mobile devices. So there's this whole wave of evolution that's happening, and big benefits that we can reach, but also big challenges that we have to face. So in order to address this, you know, following on the last point as well, this is kind of a look at the first decade of the 21st century and the traditional three-tier infrastructure that was put in place to support web-based clients, thin and thick, and really service web apps and web services. web proxy, app server, and then data services connected to the storage. So this is really can be tweaked a bit in order to provide the same service to the mobile world, but there are some key differences. So, I'm putting a blatant product plug here, but really component-wise, you can evolve the web proxy into what we're calling a mobile access gateway, which really becomes a more device-oriented gateway servicing and proxying APIs that can be used both by those mobile apps as well as by the previous consumers, whether they're web apps, thick client apps, or even other application servers at partner companies or internally. The app server becomes the API server, really, and this is a bit of just a naming convention, but there's an important distinction here. What we've seen, I think it's fair to say that in the last decade, we saw a real blurring of the line a lot of the times between the actual user experience, presentation logic that would be rendered in browser-based apps and the app server tier. So a blurring of the line between the business logic and the presentation logic, but a very clear, distinct line between what's happening on the data side. I think that with what we're seeing with having to service multiple device types, multiple user types on the front end now, on the presentation side, along with the big data revolution and the more tight coupling of data services with the actual business logic and business intelligence that can be embedded, the real distinct line now, instead of being between app server and data services, the real distinct line comes at the front end of the API server. The API becomes the real firm border between where the user experience meets the actual data-oriented services. So this is key because it's fundamental in this infrastructure topology. The mobile access gateway really has a set of capabilities that are fundamental enablers of this whole paradigm. So let's look at that. This is the slide I showed before in terms of what the challenges are around needing to be addressed in this new paradigm. And the good news is that this mobile access gateway concept really addresses each of these points. As I said before, the proliferation of mobile devices, bringing those volumes up much higher, means that your back-end systems, the APIs that are the gateways into the services that your enterprise provides, there's going to be volumes that they may not have experienced before. And so having this mobile access gateway component, really, it's optimized for this high-scale traffic. And there's a huge benefit for consumers of these services to go to one place, have a one-stop shop for APIs, which is great, but you have to make sure that that one-stop shop, being the gateway, is ready for that volume of traffic. All of the different API servers on the back end may have just slices of that volume, but the gateway needs to handle all of the volume. And so, a gateway needs to be optimized for that traffic. Also, as I said, the blurring of the line or the movement of the perimeter based on the bring your own device approach, instead of being able to lock down the whole device, means that you're going to need to move the security perimeter back. And this could be either in the app sandbox on the device itself, but in all cases, you need to make sure that you've got strong security protection in the gateway layer. So at the entry point to your organization, as soon as those mobile devices are sending requests in, you need to have very strong security enforcement at the API layer. So one of the things that's happening, we had a pretty well-evolved security model around SOA, around WS security and so on. In the mobile world, where REST and JSON are more popular protocols, up to this point, there isn't the same evolution or maturity of standards. But the good news is that OAuth has really emerged as a common spec that is being embraced by the app development community and the API provider community. And it really is tailored for this use case. So having OAuth support in the mobile access gateway key in supporting both single enterprise use cases as well as those cases where you have more than one API provider and you need to be able to be authenticated and authorized appropriately. The composite services that are needed, again, you need that federated security to handle it, and also the ability to orchestrate between multiple API providers. So this is a fundamental function of the gateway, both as an orchestrator, so for composite APIs within the enterprise, as well as a enforcement point for the OAuth that I just talked about, where you need to go across multiple organizations. I've talked about the service APIs, really the problem of they may not be available in the formats that they're needed for on mobile devices. Being able to bridge between the protocols is key. So the gateway functions to, for example, if you have SOAP-based services in your enterprise or other formats, maybe you've got MQ formats for enterprise services, gateway can actually bridge that traffic and turn those into RESTful invocations and turn that into JSON-based data. The other thing that's key here is not only the protocol bridging, but data filtering. So when you have services that may be very verbose for the enterprise, and maybe that's appropriate for machine-to-machine communication in the enterprise, when you're offering that out to the mobile device, which is battery-powered and going over wireless network, you want to minimize the footprint of data. And so the gateway also has the capability to filter out superfluous data, compress data, put it in a format that's going to make it very friendly for mobile devices. Reuse of APIs is key. Again, I touched on this. You want to have a single gateway, single access point, so that for all the app developers out there, they know they can go to one place and get all the APIs for your organization. Data privacy and integrity. Again, being able to plug into the existing enterprise access controls and cryptographic functions are going to be extremely important as enterprises migrate to the mobile world. As I said before, we're not going to rip and replace everything here. You want to reuse as much as you can, but reuse it in a way that's not going to ruin the mobile user experience. So, we've seen examples where you can go too far in reuse, so it's a matter of using the appropriate pieces. And security policies that are in place and approved, as you probably all know from having to deal with going through security processes, much better to take the proven path and much more cost-effective to reuse existing infrastructure and policies than it would be to try and reinvent the wheel there. So being able to adapt your existing security processes and reuse them in a mobile context, very important, and the gateway allows you to do that. And finally, this whole big data concept, having the integration capabilities of the gateway really allows you to plug into multiple service providers and APIs in the enterprise, and this includes real-time analytic data that can be synthesized and then used in the flow of integration. So, for example, when an API request comes in to the gateway, you can siphon that off to either populate big data and operational data stores, or you can use it to query event correlation systems to check and see if there's meaningful events for that particular client or for that particular resource that's being requested. So there's a whole lot packed into this mobile gateway component, and really, to me, this is the key enabler for this mobile app to enterprise API integration space. But it's not just about this real-time integration, really been focusing on the real-time aspects of the integration. There are other stakeholders to consider here. First of all, the app developers themselves, cowboys that are out there creating the mobile apps, they're wanting to know what are those APIs, right? What's available? How can I use them? And having the real-time exposure of the APIs is going to enable that at runtime, but there's a whole process around developing the apps that use the APIs that needs to be addressed. Secondly, the API owners themselves, right, they want to be able to control the access and not only control the access, but also monitor the access, see the usage patterns, being able to collect data in order to monetize and really get the benefits out of the APIs that are available as we illustrated earlier. Information security, as I said before, security is the #1 concern around opening up the enterprise to the mobile world. So how are we protecting the data? How are we controlling access to the data? Those questions need to be answered. And finally, operations, right? This is now a potentially explosive set of volumes around traffic coming in. When it's coming into the mission-critical infrastructure, we need to be able to track the usage from that perspective, not just from the business perspective, but also from the operational perspective to ensure we've got system availability and smooth operations. So we offer industry-leading gateway capabilities. As I illustrated, this is the key to the whole API management solution space. But there's more to it than just a gateway. We have a suite of functionality that we offer that we really feel addresses all of the stakeholders' needs, fundamentally addressing the runtime capability needed in the gateway, which is, as I keep saying, the key to the whole solution, but also to address the needs of the API owners and the developers, operations, and security. So in addition to this API proxy layer, which is the mobile access gateway, we have a portal solution that allows developers to discover what APIs are out there, to learn about the methods for accessing the APIs, including what types of security needs to be marked up on these, what are the resources that are available in the APIs, what methods can I call, and what data am I going to get back, what formats are available, all that information, as well as for the API owner's view, all the metrics around what type of usage is happening on my APIs, who's allowed to access them, what are the spikes in volume, what types of rate limits and so on can I implement on my APIs to ensure that they're being used appropriately. We also have a key operational tool called the Enterprise Service Manager, which is plugs into the gateway, and the portal is also plugged into the gateway. And really what the ESM does is allows you to provide more automated deployment to large infrastructures, allows you to track usage, dashboarding of usage from the operational perspective to make sure everything's running smoothly. And the final piece of the API management suite is this secure OAuth toolkit. As I mentioned before, OAuth is really the de facto standard in the mobile app to enterprise integration space. It has been embraced, and really we've got the toolkit that allows you to support a wide variety of OAuth scenarios for both two-legged OAuth, where you're just dealing with a mobile app connecting into the enterprise, or three-legged, where you're dealing with multiple API providers and leveraging a single authorization entity. So a very comprehensive set of functionality, and let's take a look. So how it all works, really, you start with the security groups internally and the API owners publishing and securing the APIs to make sure that they're available out there for the mobile world. Once available, you can onboard the developers. They can then leverage the APIs that are there using the portal, which automatically can discover the APIs that are available in the gateway. Thirdly, tracking the usage, you can monitor your APIs for operational purposes and monetize them for business purposes by tracking all the usage statistics. And this becomes a real loop that we keep going through and keep iterating on to add new versions of APIs, add new APIs, and continue to foster the community of development that can be both inside your enterprise and outside your enterprise as you're migrating to the mobile world. Just to go through some of the feature sets that are available in the technology, as I said, the gateway is a fundamental piece, and this is really the mission-critical runtime infrastructure that, as we move to the enterprise mobile space, becomes the absolute key to the whole picture. So, as I said before, we've got the mobile migration happening in the consumer world. A lot of the apps that are out there maybe are less intensive on their data usage. some of the data is not as mission critical or sensitive. So they're not necessarily taxing the infrastructure of a large enterprise. As we get more mission critical with the APIs that are going to be offered, and as we look to offer up enterprise apps on mobile devices that will be used for the day-to-day tasks of employees in an organization, the volumes are going to go up, the security needs are going to go up, and just the number of APIs and apps are going to increase steadily, so that if you don't have a strong security enforcement point on the perimeter of the integration point with the mobile devices, and if that piece is not tuned for high volume, it's just the solution's not going to work. And the good news here is that our gateway has evolved for 10 years in supporting high volume, high security environments, and is easily extensible from our heritage of web services-based integration, XML and web app integration, to the mobile world to handle RESTful interfaces in OAuth and JSON formats and all of the data filtering needs for mobile. So this is, as you can see, a ton of support for standards that are required in the mobile space. Now, on top of this, I want to just talk a bit more about OAuth. The web app world had its own security model that built up, very cookie-based, browser-based, and really built on a set of assumptions around being able to lock down desktops and laptops. And although, with laptop usage, you could potentially lose a laptop, chances are if you did, somebody's going to have to hack your password and so on to break into that laptop. Leaving your phone in the back of a taxi is a much more likely scenario. And as I said before, we just can't build any sort of security solution on the assumption that the physical device is always going to be in the right user's hands. So really, to accommodate this and to ensure that we're enforcing security on the perimeter of the data services at the API level, OAuth is the standard of choice that allows you to both handle those two-legged and three-legged scenarios. Within the OAuth world, there's really a few different roles. We've actually created the gateway so that you can provide either an authorization service for OAuth or have Layer 7 be the resource server as well. But in a lot of cases, we're both. So, when you have needs for even the most advanced OAuth cases, we're able to accommodate that through our OAuth toolkit, which is available, and also the actual inherent OAuth capability that we've got on the gateway. The portal piece is really, really key. For those of you who have done mobile app development or even maybe just been curious and looking around the web at things like Google APIs, you can see now that more and more companies are, especially with a big web presence, are offering up their services as APIs publicly. And this is really the paradigm that enterprises are moving to, where it's not just going to be publicly available APIs for big, let's say Google Maps as an example, but now we're going to be providing internal enterprise services in the same way. And so, the paradigm of mobile app development, as people get more and more used to developing mobile apps using whatever development suites they want to use, it's not so much the case in, let's say, the SOA world where you may discover through UDDI or some other registry mechanism, okay, what service is available, or in some cases just have to go back and drill into any sort of metadata that you could find, emailing WSDLs and so on. But in the mobile app world, there's a nice, clean approach that is very, actually, human-centric. So instead of this machine-oriented world that we had in the integration in the past, there's a real respect for the developer. And this is a very much a developer-driven world. So what we've observed, and we've worked with our clients, is that this approach of really catering your metadata around your APIs towards the developers themselves, making it very readable, doing everything from the coder's perspective, including snippets of code, including whatever metadata makes sense and explanations. This is the world that we're moving towards for mobile app development. And so we have this portal piece, which, as I said, the good thing is it plugs directly into the gateway and discovers the APIs that are there, but then turns that into a very human-readable context that makes it very palatable for developers to go in and find out what APIs are available in the enterprise. And the fact that we're building it off of the runtime piece makes it very much a quick start for organizations who want to move to this model, want to offer up their key services as APIs within the enterprise. And lastly, the operational side of it, when you're seeing the APIs, we can really use a combination of the operational metrics as well as what I'm not showing here, which is the portal piece. There's an API owner view as well, and that data can be built together to really build the model, the business model of your APIs, and allow you to monetize, allow you to create those new revenue opportunities through the usage of your APIs, through the contracts that you have with your mobile app users. So this is a very strong suite of capability. It's a new paradigm, but the good news is that although there's all this new benefit and growth opportunity, it's a relatively easy step using our solution set to enter this world. If we look back a bit here and look into the web application security world, this can be kind of an extension of the topology I showed earlier, or including some operational and security infrastructure. You might have a web proxy, app server, database providing the 3 tiers of business logic, and then you're plugging into policy server like SiteMinder and a directory like Active Directory to provide your authentication and authorization services. And this is what worked for the browser-based world, and this is still very much functional, very much appropriate for our enterprise. What we saw evolve over the last 10 years or so, as companies adopted web services and SOA, probably moved to a model where, okay, now we have this capability, and this is really where Layer 7, where we've cut our teeth and grown tremendously as a company, providing web services security functions, plugging into that existing infrastructure, and providing B2B web services, providing internal web service policy enforcement, and already establishing the components that are involved in these mission-critical integrations. The good news for moving to the mobile world is that it really is not a huge leap forward to establish the infrastructure. You can leverage the same gateway infrastructure that you have today if you have it. You can leverage the same components in the enterprise. We can plug into SiteMinder and offer authentication and authorization. We can bridge between OAuth on the front end and calling into the Active Directory on the back end. We can continue to monitor gateway services the same way. Connecting the mobile apps, probably the key infrastructural component to add here is the API portal, where you're able to now discover the services that are available and do the development that way. But even that component utilizes the gateway functionality that's already suited for the enterprise usage. So this evolution, I think this is good news that in order to establish a strong mobile integration based on these APIs that really encapsulate the key function of your organization is not a huge evolution step forward. It's not a revolution. It really is an evolution. Now, we've got a number of customer stories already. I think my impression before really diving into this space was that organizations were a lot further behind the curve on adopting this bring your own device approach, but there are actually a number of organizations that are really, really far along the curve here. We've been working with a number of them. This is one example. You can imagine the healthcare industry. We've got, that's an industry where there's huge movement towards, HIPAA standards and so on, and digitizing all the medical records data that's out there. The easiest way to do that is to capture the data in a digitized form in the first place. So iPads are becoming very popular in the healthcare space, and we worked with this one customer who wanted to make sure that we're capturing information on an iPad app that can be passed around and capture that data securely and digitally, instead of putting it on a paper form, having to go into the doctor's office and fill in the same form every time you go for an appointment. Really getting that caught up front in a much more smooth way. Huge cost savings, better customer experience, and a more optimized process. So that's one use case that is becoming more and more popular. Another case here, we worked with an airline service provider who, actually took the approach of, just web app enabling taking their existing kind of back-end services and just trying to put a web front end on that, browser-based front end, and throw that out in mobile space. But that didn't go over well, because although users had access on their mobile devices, they weren't happy with the user experience. So they took a second step, and they were able to leverage the actual back-end APIs that provided the services, but they built their own mobile app, which was much more popular, tailored to a much better user experience, and then utilized the actual APIs and portal functionality to develop that mobile app quickly. And now they have very good adoption rate on their mobile usage, and as you can imagine, for their customers, being able to access their services in a mobile much more gives them a lot more capability than having to be tied to a desktop or a laptop computer. And the final case study, I think, is a very interesting one, where this is really a case of not just the mobile use case, but looking at that whole evolution that I just went through. We're working with this energy provider where they're going through smart grid migration, which is a huge, definitely a quantum leap forward for the energy and utilities industry, going from very limited data flow, infrequent data flow, to a world where they can now collect data much more frequently and with much greater granularity from smart meters, and even have the opportunity to connect to those smart meters and manage them in real time. So they've actually taken a number of steps using our gateway technology, where first they're using us as a very high volume gateway for handling the smart meter data coming in. Secondly, using us as a security gateway for their assisted service channel to do the authentication and authorization controls as they connect their CSRs into their monitoring and servicing applications. And then the next step they're taking is to leverage those APIs that expose consumer services and provide mobile self-service, so that now they can connect into that smart grid infrastructure and actually tune, allow their consumers to do settings. So this is a great evolution step where you can see, they started with just an integration use case inside the enterprise with their smart meters, but have continued to extend that and are now extending that out into the mobile world. So, big time cost avoidance for having to deal with the volume of traffic they've got from the meters, better customer service, and improved availability, because they're able to provide that proactive system monitoring. So across industry, this is, every industry is going through this evolution. Every industry is adopting mobile in a big way. Huge opportunity, and I really feel strongly that utilizing the APIs in the enterprise, there's a big value proposition for our solutions to be able to get you up and integrated quickly. So just to summarize, there's no stopping this tidal wave of users bringing their own devices into the enterprise. And it's a challenge. It is a big challenge for the IT groups in the enterprise to accommodate that wave without compromising security and SLAs. So it's a tightrope of making sure that we can do that. There's a big benefit and a big upside to those mobile apps, and really to enable that upside and to address the concerns on the previous point around not compromising security and SLAs, I really think the best way to go is to leverage those existing services and APIs that are already available and proven in the enterprise. And really this API management solution space, and in particular our Layer 7 API management solution, which really I think is unique in being able to handle the enterprise SLAs for that gateway, that key gateway functionality, I think is a key way to get started and get started quickly. So thank you very much for your time. I'm just going to go to the chat box now and address some of the questions that we've got. So the first question is around, do we see enterprise applications being moved to the cloud and to assist in scaling requirements for handling mobile? And this is absolutely the case. So I both feel good about and bad about the fact that I don't think I said cloud once through the whole presentation. But absolutely, the three big waves of IT or trends or movements that are happening this year are mobile and big data and cloud. And I think cloud is really being driven especially by mobile, and that's the point that's being raised in this question. So what we're seeing is, to the point I made earlier, cloud-based applications, by their very nature of being accessible through networks, are very much API-driven applications. I mean, you have some SaaS applications that are web app-driven, but a lot of the public cloud services, Salesforce being the big example, have those APIs already available to be consumed in the way that we're describing here with enterprise APIs. And also, especially when companies are moving their own applications out of their enterprise into the cloud, we're definitely seeing that. And again, the common denominator there is the API. So we have a number of customers who are today moving their workloads into the cloud, and we do have examples where we're providing multi-channel access into those cloud-based services, and in some cases handling both the on-premise workloads and the cloud-based workloads through our gateways consistently. And once again, what it means is if you've got a on-premise infrastructure and a cloud-based infrastructure, if you offer a single access point for your APIs, that just makes it easier for your consumers, and they don't care where it's running as long as it's running. In terms of the API portal space, there's a question around, are we seeing enterprise customers mostly using API portal for internal developers or external developers? At this point, really, the trend is that there's a lot of, most of the API or most of the mobile app development is happening externally. So using things like the App Store for publishing apps, and then leveraging public portals like the Airline example I gave there to build apps that leverage those APIs. But that's only because we're at the early point of adoption here in the enterprise. And I think there's a whole model that's going to emerge where not only do you have the internal portal and internal developers using the portal for developing mobile apps, but really, you're not going to see enterprise apps published on things like the App Store or the Android app market and so on. It's really going to be companies themselves using mobile device management capabilities, spinning up their own App Store-like repositories for their own enterprise apps, which will change the game a little bit, but again, really be built off the core APIs that constitute the core business of the company. And finally, a question around how secure can mobile use be, right? Can it be used in government defense organizations? As I said before, that's the interesting part of the consumerization trend. As opposed to these high technologies being created and researched and developed in government and in defense and then being propagated through business usage and then into the consumer world, going backwards, I think it does become harder at each step. Certainly the security concerns around defense organizations and the highest security environments in government and intelligence and so on, there's going to be more of a reluctance to adopt mobile use for those most sensitive areas. But because the upside, I think in this case, in those sectors, certainly a stronger arm of IT to push back on adoption. Like it's not just going to be, some agent coming in and saying, "Hey, I want to use my iPhone for looking through the sensitive intelligence data." But really, what you're going to see is the upside around the benefits of mobile enablement are so huge, and especially in those sectors. So you can imagine mobile defense units, that there's no avoiding it. I mean, the mobile technology, wireless technology, is already being used in enclaves and is already being used in ways. But this leveraging of the APIs, certainly the security models that have been leveraged for mobile usage today in those sectors will be used for API access as well, and it'll make sense to have the technologies themselves used, although albeit maybe in a little bit of a different way. Okay, well that is the set of questions that we had in the chat box. Once again, I'd like to thank you for your attendance today. As I said, this is recorded. It will be posted, and please check back on our social touch points to make sure that you connect in for our next webinar in the series. And I look forward to talking to you again in the near future. Thank you.